One of the things that I enjoyed about when I was working with you and I enjoy about this genre, it feels like there are rules. And I know that's not maybe the right way to express it, but like in commercial, you know, a commercial could go in 1,000 different directions. But with a when you're telling a story and when you're doing a documentary or you're doing a series, there's a structure, there are
Mhm.
acts, there's the beginning, the middle, the end. Break that down for us a little bit so that we can understand the those different pieces, because I think for me anyway, having that structure and understanding that structure, it's so good to help me, ground myself to what's going on in the script or where I think I need to be going with the script.
Well, absolutely. I would say that most documentaries and docu-series, and I'm going to say most, okay? And I'm going to start with, again, the audition is most important because even if you got a great demo, very few people are going to book you from your demo. They're going to say, gee, we loved your demo. We want you to audition for this because they want to hear you on their specific material.
Yep.
It's going to be an hour long, right? It's an hour long show. They don't want to risk, well, wait a minute. He had a wonderful little creepy piece for 15 seconds. Can he sustain that and all the various layers in our entire script? So then they'll give at least a minute and a half audition. So I try to tell people that most start with a cold open, a tease and intro ahead of the show promo that is usually 5 to 10 degrees more engaging than your actual storytelling copy. It's something to pull people in. And it usually, in the cold open, somewhere in the cold open, it will indicate in its own way why you want to watch this, the purpose of the documentary or docu-series. Usually it's like, find out why, blah, 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 or discover how, blah, 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 or see how, blah, blah, blah. So cold opens, unfortunately, cold opens aren't always as storytelling. They're a little more promo-esque, okay? Yeah. And it's unfortunate that that's at the very beginning of the audition, but then you've got another 2 minutes of an audition where you get a chance to tell your story. So I tell people, if you're not good with the promo-esque cold open, just read the body copy where it starts with Act 1. Start there, because if you go through that, you'll know more about the documentary so you can circle back to that open or tease and understand why you're pulling people in.
Right.
But those two elements, there is an open, cold open, intro, tease, and then, of course, there is the body copy. But most hour-long shows, if it's a docuseries or a documentary special, okay, that's on a cable network,
yep,
usually is in 5 or 6 acts. It depends on the material, but let's just start. Let's say it was 5 acts.
Okay.
The first act might be almost 12 minutes long. So there you are for 12 minutes. Commercial. Then 10 minutes. Commercial. Then 8 minutes. Commercial. 5 minutes. Commercial. Final 3 minutes. They always love stacking more commercials toward the end because they want to pull you in.
Yep.
And then you're really, I want to find out.
You got to stay to find the ending, right?
Yeah, okay. You know what I mean? And so those subsequent acts are shorter. But I think more importantly, each act serves a purpose. Now, when you're auditioning, you're not going to audition all 5 acts. But when you get to the session and you've got the script, you've been given the script, a couple days ahead of time, it's good for you to look at and say, this is an overview in the first 12 minutes of what we're talking about. This second act happens more to do with the background and the history of this plantation. The third act, we introduce the characters that moved on to the plantation. The fourth act, okay, here's where the flood was and where the disaster was. And then the fifth act, how somebody came back 100 years later and rebuilt this plantation, whatever. I'm just talking off the top of my
Sure.
head, but each act does have a purpose. And as a talent, you're entitled to say, okay, so my sense is that Act 4 is about blah 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 blah. Yeah, this person is really front and center in this one, so let's lean in to what he does. So, structure. You're right, Mark. Structure is actually your friend in TV narration, and that is why so many people are blown away when they find out, oh, you mean we're not just going to keep going and going and going, and when I flub, then I go back and I do a pickup? No, you're probably going to be doing a cell at a time. Or there are some producers who might say, let's do these 3 cells because they're all similar in the visuals, and then we'll stop here because then we're going to a different geographical locations here. But they do that. They do that so they're going to get specificity in your read. They're looking for specificity in those different sections.